Good Nacht. You're watching the Cheese Room podcast with me, the caller, live and direct from the man cave. I'm sure there must be some things we need to discuss tonight. But before I do any of that, I should probably go around the room. So first of all, joining us from the US of A, Jack H. Oh, this is just so awkward. Two Jacks. I'm going to have to Jack H and Jack K. Jack H, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great. Thank you for inviting me on tonight. I'm always happy to talk Spurs, especially when there's absolutely nothing to talk about.
Well, you absolutely bossed it on Wednesday night, so there you go. You've been called into the Friday night brigade.
I have been promoted. I appreciate it.
We're all equal in this league. We're all equal. There's no show that's the better one. Obviously, it's the ones I host, but that's a side issue. And other Jack K, how are you, Jack? Flat cap Jack. There you go, flat cap Jack.
Alles gut mit mir. Guten Abend. Yeah, I'm looking forward to what could be a big build up to a deadline, and then I imagine Spurs will be like, do you know what? I think we'll decide this on Sunday or something like that, and then we just end up staying on Twitter all day for nothing. I don't know if I've refreshed. I'm on Twitter constantly, but I don't know if I've refreshed it as many times as I have today. It's quite nice that Elon has decided not to let the servers go rogue or anything, because we definitely do need them to work today.
Yeah, he's doing a great job of X, clearly. And of course, it's transfer deadline day, according to Jack. Harry Kane's that bigger player. He gets his own transfer deadline day. So we will keep you abreast of any developments during the show. Also joining me, Stuart. Welcome back on the show, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, all good. It was. I was just getting ready to talk about VDV, but the guys at Bayern seem to be determined to keep us busy in other things as well. So, yeah, it'll be interesting.
Well, we'll definitely touch on VDV. We'll touch on all the transfer rumours and confirmed signings, confirmed by the pen of Fabrizio Romano rather than Daniel Levy this evening. Do keep your questions coming in the chat. Do smash that like button. Thanks to the 50 of you who tuned in with 2 minutes gone, so we're off the mark quickly. Please do smash that like button. Let us know you're here. Let us have your thoughts in the chat. Send us a super chat if you're feeling particularly generous, and we'll make sure it's read and discussed on the show. And do try and share the stream if you can. We appreciate every single viewer. So thanks for spending the next 90 minutes or so with us. I can guarantee you it will be more entertaining than a Conte 90 minutes. So let's talk about Kane first. Yeah. So we had the Bayern board fly in. There was a plane tracker and everything. It was all going very interestingly. And I think Levy told them, his price and his position, and then they fled, just like Germans always do. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. That's bad.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're taking digs at Conte.
I'm going to get a reprimand here from the Cheese Room board. But I'm on it, so no problem. I've got voting rights and everything. So they left with their tails tucked between the legs, but they seem to be back today, Stuart, with a crazy offer. So I believe I'm right in saying it's including bonuses, add-ons, call them what you will, 120 million euros. So that's what you read on Twitter. Whether that's true or not, obviously, is another thing. I read lots of things on Twitter that aren't true and passed off as fact every day. But what are your thoughts on that? And I suppose the question is, would you take the money?
If it's, this is the annoying thing, isn't it? Having to do these constant conversions between euros and pounds. Why can't we just have it all done in pounds? It would make everyone's life so much easier. But it seems, if I'm correct, that without the add-ons, it's around, I think it's still only around 85 million, is it?
Something like that.
If it's with all the add-ons, whatever these add-ons are, we don't know what the details are, that it ends up being literally just over the 100 million euro mark, or 100 million pounds mark. So I still don't think it'll get accepted. Who knows? But I'll be very surprised if this happens with that amount of money, because Levy will just look like an idiot that he's caved really late before the season to get a bit of cash. I know the guy's sort of very, Teflon in terms he doesn't let anything phase him. But I think if he's anticipating or wanting to have riots at the game on Sunday or against Man United, I think it would be a bit of one of my dogs is choking to death behind me.
Choke quietly.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll be very surprised if it happens. But we've been here before where we've had big players go much later in the window than this. You know, Berbatov, you know, the Bale deal. It can happen. It's not impossible, but given the current climate against the board and everything like that, I'd be, unless they've got something spectacular lined up to replace him with, I just think it'd be crazy.
I mean, £103 million, English pounds, is a lot of dollars, isn't it, Jack H? It's you could get a lot for that, right? Tempted?
Many clubs that have good, smart recruitment policy could get a lot for that £100 million. I'm not sure that I can say that we fall into that category, but yeah, you can buy a lot of stuff with £100 million. I'm kind, you know, on Wednesday's show, I put my odds at 60-40 he stays, and that was before the announcement of the Veliz deal that now seems like maybe not be a loan back. And so when I saw it was a loan back, I was like, well, that's clearly doesn't sound like, you know, Kane's off. But I do know that there's, to Stuart's point, there's no way that Daniel Levy is going to sell Harry Kane, again, arguably the greatest player that's been at the club, at least certainly one of them, for less than a record fee. I mean, you know, the Bale deal eventually got to 100 million euros, and I can't do the exchange rate inflation adjustment. I'm sure Levy can.
86 million it was at the time. 86
yeah,
million.
But eventually it came out that, you know, they wanted it to be underneath what they paid for Ronaldo, but then ultimately they paid 100 million. He's not going to sell for less than that, and so I guess 100 million pounds gets you certainly north of what Bale got, but it still sounds like less than what Levy came into the deal with, which was thinking about 125. So I still think it's right a balance 50-50 whether he goes, even with all the noise. I mean, I know we're talking about being linked with every striker in the world, but I think I can't say that that's legitimate news. That's just people making their own reports to try and drive their own interest in likes and reshares and all that sort of stuff. So I still say it's 50-50 at best at this point that he goes, but I'm not overly concerned if he does. I mean, I'm also, you know, I'm a club guy, and if Harry leaves, because eventually he will, whether he retires or he moves on a free or whatever, he's not going to be playing for Tottenham for, you know, so we're going to move on. Might as well I have no problem if they get 100 million pounds or more. I just hope that it translates into at least one more center back, at the very least, because as much as I like Van De Ven, he is far from the finished product. So we're going to need to invest that money smartly. And I just hope that this club can do that this time, because they haven't always in the past.
Mr. Flatcap, would you sell Kane? And I suppose the question is, if you think he's going to leave on a free at the end of the season, does that make it more palatable?
I can see why a lot of people on surface level sort of see it as bad business to let pretty much anybody go on a free, especially sort of Harry Kane's caliber. I just feel like Spurs are not really in the, let's say, balanced or kind of good position that a lot of other Premier League clubs are kind of with their squad. I think we've had so much to do this summer, and we haven't even really gotten it all done. Like, it feels like we've kind of only just gotten kind of the ball rolling, even on some of it. I know we did sign Madison. I know we signed Solomon. But in my opinion, I feel like a lot of the signings that we've actually made thus far have sort of kind of been like, if you had a chore list, kind of just knocking off the really easy stuff kind of first and then saving kind of the harder stuff for last. And it sort of feels like we've ended up saving the harder stuff for last, and we don't have that much time left in the day or so on, maybe in the window, to really get it all done. And so if selling Harry Kane right now would mean we get a lot more money to get some of this stuff done, I understand how people would be behind that, but I just feel like where we are right now, there's only so much left in the window. There's still so much that I think does need to be done in this kind of defensive department. I think even before this whole kind of summer transfer business started, most Spurs fans would have said 2 center backs at a bare minimum. And I think most of them were kind of saying, you know, of a pretty high quality as well. Now, all of a sudden, we've been waiting so long that I do feel like I'm desperate for any sort of center back that moves at this stage.
You got one.
We have got one, but it feels like we still have a lot more to do. And if now we're kind of rationalizing, oh, well, if we sell Kane, then that means we can get our second center back. This is where I start to get a bit worried, because originally before we even selling Kane, we were saying we should bring in 2 center backs and we should be doing this and that. And that's where I'm a bit worried right now. It feels like Spurs have not really been kind of going about their business, I think, as kind of quickly or as efficiently as they should. And so then if you're going to sell Kane, you're kind of just adding to a lot of drama and to already a lot of chaos of a summer window. I'm kind of worried it could end up being like a Chelsea or kind of Forest type window where you have 20 players leaving, 20 players coming in. And yay, that could be good for the future, but might not be good for Ange Postecoglou. And that's kind of the most important person for me. So I'm kind of happy to let him go, honestly, on a free, if that means that we can get a lot of our other business done that we were kind of supposed to get done, whether we sold Kane or not, kind of, in my opinion.
You see, I don't think 2 centre backs of the highest caliber are absolutely essential. If I'm being really brutally honest, I think one and a prospect is fine when you've got Romero in there, when you've got the wonderful backup of Eric Dyer. You don't need 2 world-class centre backs. Of course you do. But I think with just going back to Kane, and get your Kane questions in the chat. Let us know what you think. I'm going to go to a few in a second, but just to round off for me, there is this argument that, as Dan says, one of our channel members, shout out to you, we're more likely to get Champions League if Kane stays. How much money do you get for that? Surely in the same region as 85 million. I think it's about 50 million you get for qualifying for it, don't you? And then it's obviously per game, you get like 2 million per win, 1 million per draw, and there's all the rest of it. And it's the new look Champions League next season as well. So let's not forget there's 5 potential places up as long as British teams do well in Europe this year. So, you would think that there is some merit in that argument, wouldn't you say, Stuart?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that work in our favour if we do end up deciding to sell. Is, as you said, there's the possibility of an extra place for Champions League football. Then you've got the fact that we're not in Europe this season, so we don't have the pressure on the squad that we may have done in previous seasons. And I suppose the key point is with Ange Postecoglou's game style and how he plays the game, Kane is sort of, is less needed in that kind of system. And I think we do have quite a lot of players in our attacking setup that can cover that gap. Nothing's guaranteed. Obviously, we don't know. We haven't kicked a ball in the Premier League yet, but on paper and based on his previous systems at Celtic and other clubs, then I think a lot of that is set up where the setup is a team, not based on let's play through individual players. It's a system that can work in multiple ways with multiple players. So if it was ever going to happen and we have to take some money and rebuild other parts of the squad as a result of it for the longer term, and as Jack H was saying, that he's going to go at some point. So it's just, do we do it where it's more favourable for us? Because I think all of us would accept that if he ended up agreeing a deal in January to go to Chelsea or Man United, we'd be horrified that he was just walking out on a free. So if we can at least stop that, maybe it's worth paying now. And I'd rather be doing it now with Angeball than now with Conte ball ahead of us. That's for damn sure.
Well, 100%. You need to have someone in the box to finish in Ange's system, but they don't need to be world class. And I was making this point to someone I worked with today. Under Conte's system or Jose's system, you made 6 chances in a game. You had to take 3 of them, to win the match or whatever. Under Ange's system, you probably make about 30 chances a game, so you could afford a few more misses. And I think that's where, people concerned about Richarlison taking the number 9 shirt, which I do share some of the concern. He's not been prolific in his career, but I think he'll have the opportunity to be prolific in that side with all those chances. Either that or he's just going to miss shitloads and it'll be a disaster. But, we shall see. So if I had to say to each of you, would you let him go for free at the end of the season? And the caveat to all of this is obviously he will then be able to pick his club. So as I understand the contract law, the Bosman rule, he could negotiate with clubs foreign come January, not domestic. And at the end of the season, he could add domestic into the mix, basically. So the reality of all of that is that we could lose him to Man United, Chelsea, God forbid, Arsenal, whoever, if we don't sell him now. And obviously, we would get good money for him now. We could reinvest in the squad. And I know we've got limited faith to do that, but you'll get nothing at the end of the year because I think it's fair to say Kane could have signed an extension many times over by now and hasn't. And I think it's probably quite naive if you think Angeball is going to impress him that much that all of a sudden he's going to turn Spurs into title contenders, which is basically what Kane wants. He wants to win titles, right? So I think we can probably agree he's probably not signing that extension. So taking all of that information into the mix, Jack H, would you keep him and make him honour the last year of his contract with a very, very, very slim chance for a contract extension? Or would you sell him for the 100 million quid?
Well, I think the proper business decision is to sell him, assuming that you're going to get north of 100 million pounds. Because I agree with you that I mean, had we been in a position where Micky Van De Ven and one other, whether it's Tosin or Tapsoba or some other acceptable level center back, had been signed at the beginning of the window and had been in all preseason, and you were at the training, you're seeing how the team is playing in this new system, and you've got now really depth at midfield and you got depth at the forward line, and everything's clicking. You could roll the dice, say, hey, you know what? Harry doesn't clearly, he isn't banging to get out. He would prefer to stay and win trophies at Tottenham than go anywhere else to win trophies. So I'm willing to roll the dice because I've built a financial behemoth that's cranking out money. I can actually afford to potentially roll the dice with this. But the fact that you're bringing Van De Ven in, a week before the season starts, and you've got someone who, if they're willing to pay, and again, it's not just the price tag, but how much are you able to negotiate up front from the Germans, because they can afford to write the check. I mean, people don't realize what kind of revenue they generate over there. They basically own the entire German market, and they generate a ton of money. They have it.
They're biggest in the world, is it? Their revenue, third biggest.
Their commercial revenue is bigger than Tottenham. I mean, it's big. It's not quite the size of Man United. I know The Athletic did a piece on their financials like this past week, and I don't remember the details, but they have plenty of money. They just don't historically spend it on big transfer fees. They pay great wages, and they keep their players very, very happy, of course, and they're always going to be at least in the semifinals almost every year of the Champions League. So I think for me, if you get north of 100 million pounds and a good chunk of that up front, I think it would be a poor business decision to not sell him. The emotional side of me, of course, is saying, I've seen the argument. I've got the Champions League for this coming season. Obviously, next year will be different, but reaching the group stage is 15 million. It's almost 3 million a win, and it's another 10 million for the round of 16. So if you include match day revenue, get into the group stage, all that sort of stuff, winning at least half of your matches, then you're probably talking about 30 million just for that. So
and then there's the qualification money in the first place,
right? So it gets to about 50, like you were saying. It probably gets about 50. So the question is I'm not 100% convinced Kane. I'm not saying he's clearly not going to help you get to the Champions League spots. I'm not saying that. I'm also not saying that it's impossible to get there without him. But the competition for those spots, as we all know, is as good and tight as it's ever been, because now you have the regular clubs plus Villa and Brighton, all the others coming in. So I think the business decision is to sell him. If Levy gets his price, I expect him to do it. I just don't know whether the Germans are offering enough for him to pull the trigger.
Yeah, and that's the thing we don't all know. But speaking of pulling the trigger, John's going to shoot me if I don't get some more likes. There's 129, there's 150 people watching now, and only 39 likes when he wrote this a couple of minutes ago. So please do smash the like button and hit the subscribe while you're there. We appreciate you being here. Stuart, same question to you. Would you allow him to leave on a free, assuming that's what he's going to do, or do you take the money?
Man, it is a conundrum. I think given where we are with the squad, what we're looking to do going forward, I would if the offer comes in and it's acceptable to Levy, yeah, I'd do it, because I think there is a better longer term gain, I think, and it allows us to do a lot with it. So, and like I say, it's the other element of this is that he could potentially wait until the whole end of the season and still sign a new contract. This is the problem that you leave yourself open to, is that he could.
He's created that.
Maybe that's what a lot of this is a massive ploy to get the best deal that Tottenham have ever offered to Kane. But again, I suppose the problem then becomes: is that what we want? Do we want someone who's doing an Mbappe and holding the club hostage and doing all these other dealings behind the scenes to effectively sort himself out later on when the club can do absolutely nothing to stop it? So I think if we don't sell him now, it's a risk. It's not a risk that I'll argue against, but I think given the options that we potentially have going forward and what we could add to that, and what that then means for adding to other areas of the squad that we absolutely need, if that helps us achieve that, and it gives us, we might take a hit again this season, but if it helps us the season after and then beyond, when the likes of Kane, Son as well will be another person that will be ended up leaving or losing relatively soon, then it's just part of the change, isn't it? And it's just what hit you take at that time. We all thought that the world was ending when Bale left, but we carried on and we improved, if anything, after that.
This is also a point. If he's, it starts again in January if he doesn't sign. So you've got a very unsettled period in January.
He's fed up of it. You can tell he's fed up of it because it goes against the team ethic that he works on. He doesn't like things being focused on one individual player. So if anything, Kane leaving absolutely helps what he wants to do with the club. So
yeah.
There as well.
And I suppose the thing for me is, if we're selling to a foreign power, if you like, your Munichs, your Barças, your Reals, your Milans, at least you don't have to face him in the Premier League, and at least you don't have to worry about him going to a rival, and I mean like a London rival, which would be horrific to see him in a Chelsea shirt or, God forbid, an Arsenal shirt or anything like that. Yeah. And I know that's unlikely because the way Kane is, but he is just a businessman at the end of the day. I wouldn't put it past anyone to chase the money and chase the trophies. So, there is that factor as well, isn't there? Is it better to get him out the way, out the country? And I noticed on the first round of talks, there was the possibility of a cheeky buyback clause as well, flat cap Jack, which, I mean, again, I think he did that with Bale when he sold Bale to Mr. Levy. And I think that's quite a clever ploy, isn't it?
I'd love a cheeky buyback clause, but I kind of am not in the camp of, I'm sort of like in the same position I was in the very beginning of this window. I feel like what I had originally said was I'd rather sort of split the problems that we have sort of in half between two summer windows. It felt like we had two problems going into this. One was fixing the ginormous, issue we had with the defense. It's the most goals we've conceded since the 90s. I don't even know this specific year in the 90s, but even just referencing the 90s, I think kind of just says a lot. I think it might have even been the year I was born, if I'm not mistaken. And so that just says enough for me. And so it showed that we needed to probably invest a lot of coin into that defense. Like I said, regardless of whether Harry Kane was moving or not, we needed the Maddison signing. We needed the Solomon signing. We needed the Vicario signing. And I think we're not really done with all those sort of things that needed to sort of happen, regardless of whether Kane went or stayed. And I'd rather risk then, even though that means it's bad business. I think Spurs have put themselves in this position because of bad business that we have to sort of split it in half, or we have to sort of address the defense, address the creative midfield, address the backup to Sonny, address all the other issues, and then also try to deal with Harry Kane, kind of leaving. And it felt like that was just too much to do for me at least, all in one summer, which means I'm kind of happy if Spurs spend around 100 million, to fix all those problems I just mentioned, and then spend up around 100 million the next summer to fix the Harry Kane problem. So for me, it's just sort of kind of like split it in half, take kind of the bullet, or take kind of the the loss of losing Harry Kane, and just sort of address the Harry Kane problem the following summer if you get all your other business done correctly. That's how I kind of see it personally. So, and also I think the last thing on your sort of kind of point that, yeah, I know we're going to score more chances, or we're going to have more chances under Ange. I just sort of feel like that comes with kind of the feeling that Harry Kane in some way like detracts from the goals that we score. Like he creates and he, scores goals. He's one of the few like strikers that is able to like not just be a ruthless goal scorer. He's able to create for others. So I think Harry Kane kind of just does well in any system. Yeah, he's played in a lot of defensive systems, but he showed that he can create as well as score, not just score. So I know Richarlison would do well in the system because he's kind of just a goal scorer, but it's not like Harry Kane can't just be a goal scorer, I think, too. I mean, that's totally possible.
Shout out to Dan, who's a channel member and has used one of his exclusive channel super chats that you get for being a channel member for 6 months. Congratulations, Dan. If he left and won trophies, could he be back for the record, Stuart?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the whole chat about the buyback clause would be almost that perfect scenario, wouldn't it? That he goes and he obviously feels he can't do that with Tottenham right now, so he goes and scratches that itch of winning titles and trophies and all that kind of stuff, and then comes back and he can still beat the Premier League record because he's like Shearer, isn't he? He'll still be scoring goals when he's 34, 35. He just knows how to adapt his game, and barring any really serious injury, I think he'll still be a quality player then. So that would be a good scenario. And yeah, I'd be okay with that if that was the sort of clause that was in it. But like I'm sort of, it's very difficult because looking at what Jack was just saying then, I totally agree with everything he was saying, is that if you're going to do a big transition, keep him and then just use the next year to firm up who you're going to go after and make sure all of that is lined up. So if he does go at the end of the season for free, you can pull the trigger straight away, or you've got a pre-agreement and all that kind of stuff in place. So that's the problem. It's such a each scenario has positives and negatives. So, but I think the biggest issue we've got at the moment is we don't know what's going on, and we can't. And I think that's why the transfer window has gone the way it has, is because you've got this situation where you could have an influx of cash and the biggest player the club's ever had for decades leaving, or on the other hand, he doesn't leave and it's almost business as usual in terms of how we approach that side of the club. And it's a massive thing just to have up in the ether. Is just this unknowable thing, and I don't know how they've not allowed it to just get to that point, but that's where we're at, unfortunately.
I think he's forced it to get to that point, if I'm being really honest, because I think he got a bit pissed off when we didn't sell him to City, which is what he
learned a lot from that process.
And I think since then he's thought, I'm going to keep my options completely open. And obviously, even when Conte was there and things were rosy and we got top four for that short period of time where things were rosy. That's the rosy period of Conte. He was telling he didn't sign an extension then.
Every player does it though, just quickly. Like even that one guy, Brozovic. You remember Brozovic was having that year-long like contract like talk, and we thought we were going to sign him because we were with Conte at the time, like, and everything. And then he ended up weirdly signing like a year extension, only to then go to Saudi Arabia the following year, which just kind of shows, I think, that this is kind of part of how football is, especially for some of the biggest players in your team. Like, they might just wait till the last moment to kind of make their decision. It's just how it is. I also think Harry Kane is a Spurs fan at the end of the day and is quite torn. And I think that's quite human of him to be quite torn on it. If he were a Spurs fan like us, he would be kind of thinking, I just want to win it with my boyhood club. But then there's that other part of him, probably his head, that's telling him, you should probably try to win, with maybe a world-class team. You deserve to play with world-class players and not go through these constant rebuilds that end up getting scrapped up with Spurs. So I just feel like he's kind of torn right now, and I don't really blame him for that, especially since he's not like any other player that's come here. He's a guy that actually likes and cares for Tottenham Hotspur at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, the fact he's committed, and whether this is true or not, the fact that he's committed to, if nothing is done by the Brentford game, he will then stay for the season. That's quite a big statement, because he could just say nothing at all and just keep his cards open until the end of the window. So the fact he's sort of, or something's been pushed out, like I say, whether it's true or not, that if he's still around when the Premier League starts against Brentford, he'll stay. So that doesn't sound like someone who's really, really eager to get out, because if he was eager to get out, he'd put a transfer request in and that would solve everyone's problems.
Yeah.
No one would blame him. I wouldn't blame him if he put a transfer request in.
Here's my problem with Jack. You mentioned here's my problem with keeping him. Let's say you go with this, which is my favorite tweet of the day. If you don't mind me, Owen,
go for it.
Let me just kind of share this. I mean, this emotionally is how I feel. If my windows will work, there we go. This is how I emotionally feel. This is what I want to see happen. This is just a fan, right? But I recognize that that's maybe not the best business decision, right? So, but the problem with him staying is we've got a £60 million investment in Richarlison. Kane sticking around is another 12 months of not knowing whether or not that investment is going to pay off for the future, because I don't like Richarlison down the right. I like him a little bit more down the left. But where he needs to play is centrally, and I don't see Kane sticking in the club helping us understand whether or not that was a waste of money or not. I mean, I think the jury's still out on him. I like Richarlison as a guy. I like him as a player in certain respects, but keeping him around is just going to delay the fact whether or not you made that investment properly and smartly. So if he's not willing to, if he's not telling the club behind the scenes that he's absolutely 100% willing to consider signing a new deal, then that's why I say you almost have to pull the trigger if you get your fee, because Richarlison needs to play, and we don't have enough games to spread around. Harry's not a guy who's going to take every other game off. He's gonna, if he's healthy and at the club, he's going to expect to start. And I would think you'd be kind of crazy if you didn't start him anyway. So that's my biggest concern about him sticking around and then walking on a free and then going inside the Premier League to match up against you a couple times a year plus Cubs. I mean, so that's why I'm kind of saying from a business perspective, I say you got to move him on if you get your fee.
That's true. I hear that. As much as I'm also I have a huge soft spot for Richarlison. I really like Richarlison. I feel like us spending 60 million on him does sort of like cloud maybe how we look at it, where it does feel like, yeah, we're kind of pressured to play him because we spent so much money on him. I just don't think we needed to spend that much money on him in the first place, because what we were supposed to be doing is just bringing in a backup striker that was supposed to just come in for Harry Kane and be available, and just be sort of there for rotation. And it feels like, with that sort of argument, it feels like, we're just don't want to hurt Richarlison's feelings, type of thing if we keep Harry Kane around. And I think at the end of the day, Harry Kane, in my opinion, at least, I think there's an argument to say maybe he won't be, but I think Harry Kane will ultimately score 15 more goals than Richarlison would in this system. And
no
I think
question.
That's kind of worth having around. And then if we're only going to be spending 20 million on gift Orban, somebody like that, I mean, we can spend 20 million whenever we want. We could spend 20 million now, we could spend 20 million next summer. So if we're going to end up using him as sort of the eventual replacement, I'd rather just sort of wait that whole season. Then Richarlison can get his chance.
The criticism that I see on the chats about him, Richarlison never scored more than 13, 14, 15 goals. And I appreciate that. But let's just don't let just the past dictate the future in your mind. You have to think about, who did he play for? Who was he around? What system did he play in? I mean, I'm sorry, where Richarlison's played in the Premier League has not been prolific offensive systems.
I agree.
So from my perspective, we have entrusted someone to play a brand of football that is going to create chances. And I'm not saying that the Tottenham team he's around is peak Brazil, But we've got some serious playmakers that are potentially going to be on the field around him this time around. And so I really think he needs to be given the chance. Can he get 15 to 20? Because he's never going to score Kane because he doesn't have that clinical ability. But we don't need, in this system, you don't need a striker to bang in 30 goals. You need a striker who can finish chances when he's given to, win balls in the air, cause trouble, press. And if he gets 15 league goals, that's a huge home run, because I think Son's going to jump in 15, and you get Madison, you could possibly get 10. Yeah. Porro gets 5. I mean, you've got people who can score. So that's my only point. I do think 60 million is way too much just for, just to put that out there.
Well, he's 26 now, so he needs a good full season, because we're going to end up with another sort of Ndombele-esque situation. A huge fee that you got to try and recoup, which is never going to happen, and then who's going to buy him, because we always want to have more money than anyone's going to pay for. But I really like Richie. I love his work ethic. I love his.
I want him to do well. Yeah,
I do too.
Thing,
Anyway, the question I've got for you all. I mean, thanks for this one, whoever it was. But can somebody tell me why the Cheese Room podcast is labelled the mouthpiece of leading art on Spurs channel? I mean, I would like to answer this by saying, firstly, it was because he funds the Cheese Room. And my man cave was paid for by Daniel. Thank you, Daniel. It's very.
And this light came from Daniel too up here. It's a really sweet light up here.
My home pod was paid for by Daniel Levy. So thanks, Daniel.
There you go. And me and Stuart are going to be sitting in the.
We've got given tickets by Levy.
In the Levy Dome, in the Tunnel Club, with tickets from Levy. So look, all I'm saying is you're probably missing out if you're not cozying up to Daniel and getting a bit gobby on Twitter. It's probably better to play for that side rather than the far right. So it's yeah. There you go. I hope that answers your question succinctly. That's called irony. Right.
Levy paid for my Richarlison kit, so there's also that as well. So I actually do have that on the line. So there's a part of me that really wants Jack H's argument to be, because I'm almost I'm not happy with either scenario, but I'm sort of really optimistic with either scenario, because I am a big Richie fan and I bought a Richarlison kit, and so yeah, there's a lot at stake on kind of both sides for me here on both ends.
Well, look, we're gonna park Kane right here, thanks for your views on Kane. Do keep them coming through the chat, because if we've got any time, we'll come back to it. But there is a lot more to go through, because we've got some here you goes from Fabrizio Romano, friend of the show. We'll see if we can get him back on maybe in time for the end of the transfer deadline day. Van De Ven, 50 million euros. It looks like roughly in that ballpark. Which is about 40 million quid, 42 million quid, all in with bonuses. How happy are we about this, Jack? I'm going to come to you first, because I know, flat cap Jack, that is, because I know your speciality is research of players, and I guarantee you've done a AAA class stream on Van De Ven and given us the breakdown of everything so succinctly. That allows me enough time to get to the beer fridge and back. But pass it on to.
I know the drill with this at this stage. Yeah,
you know the drill. You Phil. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll cover for also maybe there might be a bit of over spillage or something too that I might have to account for too. You never know. You might be.
Mate, the amount of time you take to describe something, I'll get 3 points. Then
you'll have 2 beers drunk by then. Yeah.
Cheers.
But Mickey, I kind of am like a lot of other people, where I actually sort of just studying for a test last minute, sort of kind of jam-packed a bunch of studying, sort of on the guy the moment we were kind of linked with him. I was kind of more of a Tapsoba sort of quote unquote kind of maybe aficionado or anything like that. I really did like Tapsoba. I'd kind of known about him kind of really ever since he went to the Bundesliga. I kind of randomly was watching a lot of the Bundesliga at the time, and then kind of ever since then just sort of kept my eye on him. Whereas anybody who's seen a lot of Micky Van De Ven, honestly, congratulations to you, because he's only really had 1 season in the Bundesliga. And then before that, he was playing in the 2nd division of the Eredivisie. So I think if anybody's seen an extensive amount of him, that's pretty impressive. But what we kind of heard is that basically everybody around Europe considers him to be one of the top talented center backs kind of around his age group. He's also, I think, basically one of the highest rated center backs kind of for, I think, the Netherlands as well, kind of around his age group, where he's kind of like the premier sort of kind of up and coming center back for kind of his country. I think for the under 21s and whatnot as well. And I just think this could end up being maybe not exactly, a player that's better, in my opinion, than Tapsoba. But what's actually more important is probably what's a better partnership for Romero. It's not always who the best player is that you go after. It's who the better partnership could be. Micky Van De Ven, we're told, is kind of like maybe a bit more reserved, kind of a bit more kind of calm and composed when kind of going about his defending style, where Romero's, kind of a scoundrel type warrior that will just go after everything in sight. And that sort of balance is actually maybe quite good. Whereas Tapsoba, I would say, is not exactly like Romero, but he's also a bit more of like the aggressive type defending style. And maybe having two of those defenders at once might not be exactly the perfect partnership. I personally think you can get away with like two very aggressive defenders. I think Sergio Ramos and Pepe kind of made a living of it for a long time, being, very aggressive defenders and working well together. But I think in theory, it does make sense that you sort of have one that prefers to kind of maybe sag off a little bit, and you have the other that prefers to kind of step forward and kind of try to win the ball kind of high up. And I think the fact that Van de Ven also has more pace than the rest of the defenders compared to a Dyer or a Longley or kind of the others, because Dyer too, right? His first step was kind of always backwards, always kind of wanted to be a bit more reserved, but Dyer doesn't have the recovery pace in case it gets kind of knocked in behind him, whereas Micky Van De Ven does. So I actually think if I were to be happy and clapping or kind of, be really kind of hopium, I'm optimistic, I would say this could end up being sort of a better partnership type signing than Tapsoba was, despite me being really, excited about the links to Tapsoba. If I were to be kind of balanced or maybe more optimistic, even though I'm really excited about the signing already, I do think maybe he could end up being, in theory, a better partner. I don't know.
I think the point where I sort of felt that we really needed VDV was, and it was a good example of the scenario that can occur in a game, was when we were playing West Ham in the pre-season game. Sanchez sort of made a step forward, realised he made a mistake, was caught out of position, the ball was fed through, and no one around him could recover in time to stop the goal. And in that scenario, that could have been Romero, that could have been Dyer or someone like that. And what you want is that recovery pace to deal with that kind of situation. And I think that's primarily where he can add a lot of value to the current squad, because we just simply don't have that pace at all. And I think with Tapsoba, I think, was the intention, do you think, to play him on the left?
Because I think it was.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've not seen enough of Tapsoba to sort of see where he sort of compares in terms of pace and stuff like that. But I think, like you were saying, Jack, I think it's all about, a lot of what Ange does is all about partnerships and relationships on the pitch. And I think if you've got that situation where you've got one particular player who's got a very particular style of playing, and then his partner has that style, and then they sort of equal each other out in how they manage each other's game, that's what we want. Because you just need, if you're playing the way we are, because the amount of times that Romero did that last season, where he was overly aggressive and left space behind him, and you can't recover from it, then that's the sort of problem that's potentially solved. So I'm okay with that. And I think the whole thing about Tapsoba is, one, the window's still open until we get to the September the 1st. Anything's possible. We know that. So just assuming that everything's just done because some tweet says it is, I don't believe that. And there could be about however many other players that haven't even been talked about at all that we could be linked with, because that's the Don Paratici special of distraction to deal with the actual signing that you want. So who knows? I'm pretty certain we're going to get some more defenders in. But if we get VDV in this weekend and he's got a week to prepare for Brentford, that's good for me to start with.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we've got to face into something, though, because there's a lot of people in the chat that think you're my brother, Stuart. And you're lucky to have been, he's on mute, luckily. You're lucky to have been blessed with such good looks like me, clearly. So there you go.
I've already got one twin. I don't need another.
We'll get a good selfie at the game, and
I'll have a shave as well to make it look a bit better as well.
Yeah. Yeah, Van de Ven, Jack H, excited by the prospect of someone who can run 100 meters considerably faster than anyone on this channel.
Yeah, or probably anyone else even in the Spurs lineup from what the stats I've seen. I am excited if it is true, as has been mentioned, that this was the manager's #1 center back target, and that this club went out for maybe one of the first time evers and identified that target, paid the money required, and brought him in. I mean, because that's not how this club has operated all in the transfer window in the past. What I don't understand about is what the hell took so long. In other words, if this was the target and you're willing to pay 50 million euros, why is he getting in a week before the season? But we'll just push that aside and just move on to say, yes, I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see what Ruben Jonkind, or I'm not pronouncing that probably right, but he's with Ajax, who had them in their system, and what he said about him, saying that he's got the same potential as some of the best backs that have come through there, De Ligt and Anderweireld and Bolton and all those guys. And so, they saw the potential. He's not a finished product, and that's the biggest concern, is that he is not, like you were saying, Jack, he hasn't had a ton of first team top European competition, but he's got the skill set. He's got to work on some things, particularly as the players admitted his aerial ability at his size is not where it needs to be. And that's not anyone's strength on this team, quite frankly. So that's a little bit concerning. But at the same time, we're not sitting in our box letting teams lob balls in this system. So I don't know that you're going to have to defend a ton of aerial. You'll have set pieces and stuff, but you'll need to do that. A lot of people have criticized with these stats that you see in these stat radars about his defensive actions and defensive duels. And that's misleading, because I've seen enough of him play to see that he is the reserve defender. He doesn't go out and challenge. He uses his speed and his size to shepherd players off to the wings, buying the rest of the team time to find their shape and cover. So the fact that he hasn't great tackling and dual stats and everything, that doesn't bother me a bit. He is tailor-made for the system by his size and speed. And if it is true that Ange wanted him in and we went out and paid the money, hallelujah. That's great, that we did that for once. So I'm excited. I'm a little, I just hope the fan base is patient with him as they are with Ange, because I can tell you it's going to be potentially rough in August, September, as we watch these guys learn how to play this at the level that the Premier League is at this point.
Good point.
I mean, you look at the way Ange's system sets up, and it's basically two centre-backs camped on the halfway line, full-backs tucking in to try and pack the midfield to win possession back, to create chances for the wingers to penetrate the defence. It does worry me that, we've got Man United at home first game. That could get messy. Because, Rashford thrives playing against that kind of system, that ball over the top. Someone with raw pace like him is going to have a field day potentially. And the prospect of us having Eric Dyer at centre-back would terrify me in that system, if I'm being really honest. So I'm just pleased we've signed Van De Ven and got him done, pre-season still. not kicked a ball in Ange yet. And I think that, he could, from everything I read, and I haven't, like most people, haven't seen tons and tons of him play. I've seen some YouTube highlights, etc. But you can see he's quick, he's powerful, and he doesn't seem rash and hot-headed. So a good balance with Romero, you would like to think, because Romero is absolutely rash and hot-headed unless he can knock that out of his game. So I think they could complement each other quite well. And I think the thing is, the clamour to sign Tapsoba, yeah, I get it. He looks a really good player. He's got great stats. But the issue is, where does he play? So
I think he is a left-sided centre back. He played the majority of his time. I think
this is it. Well, he plays in a 3 normally. I mean, not that that's.
But he's played in a 4 before. He's played in a 4.
He has. But if your first two are going to be Romero, pretty much, and you would think Van De Ven, and then he's a rotation option at best, isn't he? And I do think that the money could be better spent in other positions.
I think he would displace Van De Ven. I think he would be playing ahead of Van De Ven in the left-sided center back position, and then Van De Ven would play as sort of a backup to Tapsoba, or as a left back.
Left back, yeah, you go.
Technically, the options we have at left back are Udogie, who looks great, but we still don't exactly know if he actually can technically do it defensively yet. But Region, who's I'm kind of stick up for, but doesn't seem to be everybody's favorite with the Spurs fan base.
Richard.
But it doesn't seem to. It seems to be like a Højbjerg, like a bit of a controversial one at times, like Reggie. And then the last one being Ben Davies, right? And I personally do not think Ben Davies is good enough for possession-based back four type of team. I don't think he's good enough in possession to kind of do what we need.
Jack, I can't believe you would disrespect Sessegnon like that.
Yeah,
Don't even mention him.
Yeah, mention him. He's been hanging around with HG too much. That's what it is. He's been hanging around with HG. Hey, Jack, I went off and got a beer. Look, Brooklyn Brewery.
I saw that. Pilsner, I saw.
Authentic American beer brewed in
Brewed in
Slough.
Amsterdam.
So there you go.
Yeah.
The logo looks like it would be a Radler or kind of like some sort of lemony, type of thing. Is it just a regular Pilsner?
Just a regular Pilsner, no garnish required. Very
No
nice.
garnish.
Yeah, you'd appreciate that. So Van De Ven, I think we can all say we're excited about that one. Here's my question: what would you then go and sign Tapsoba, or if money was no object, or would you want to invest? And I see we're probably signing the kid from £2 million. Is it from Blackburn?
Yeah.
Yep. Would we want to sign another centre back? I mean, we've got about 8 on the books now. The trouble is most of them are crap, right?
That's the conundrum now, isn't it? Is we've got to sell some bloody players, man, or get rid of it, or get them off the books. I mean. I'm glad we've got the deal done and we've not waited to sell a Sanchez or something, because Sanchez is the only one that I've seen anything remotely connected to a sale. Nothing about Rodon, Tanganga. I've still got a bit of hope for Tanganga under good management. No. I know that a lot of people don't rate him, but we need to sell some players. And the thing is, again, going back to the point I made earlier on, was that without Europe, we're just simply not playing enough games this season to go out. We don't 100% need 2 players in every single position, because they're not all going to get injured. We won't need to rotate much until the new year, when the FA Cup kicks in, alongside potentially a League Cup run. So why not?
You can only name 25-man playing squad plus under 21s, obviously, but we haven't got many.
I think we talked about this the other day on the chat. We're about 34 or something like that. That's going to go up by another couple of people now. So there's got to be some, I don't know, contract write-offs or something at some point, I think, because I don't know how we're going to shift all these people. So I would rather we go for a Tosin or another very talented up-and-coming defender, preferably homegrown, to help with that count. And then we use Romero and VDV until one of them breaks down with injury, or Romero decides he don't want to play because he's going to the Copa America or something, like everyone keeps saying he does.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll park that. We've also been busy signing another player, Veliz, for a quoted fee of around 15 million euros plus add-ons. Forward Argentinian, looks quite quick and quite lethal. Again, flat cap Jack, you generally bring the knowledge on these things, so fire away. Feel free to tell me what you know about this man.
Veliz, Alejo Veliz, that's as much as I know, is pretty much his name. I watch the YouTube comps like everybody else. I'm not really much of an expert on, I think it's the Argentine Primera Division. If I were to, do that for 300, I'll do that for 300. And I'm pretty sure like he's like known as sort of one of the big up and coming kind of like typical number 9s, like, you're kind of, your conventional big striker, big lad. And I'm kind of a bit of a sucker for that type of, player. I'm a big fan of Mitrovic. I'm very sad that he's gone to Saudi Arabia. I'm a big fan of, Dzeko, who I've heard he's been kind of compared to in the past as well. I have even heard this. He's the Argentinian Peter Crouch, which is really good to hear. And I just, the big guys, you can get it launched up to, balls into the box, get it launched. I'm kind of all about that sort of kind of a style. So if we can do that with Veliz, I'd be very happy. But in all seriousness, I don't really think he's going to be a player that will feature all that much this season. I'd be surprised if he did. But he could be a real talent for the future. And he is technically, a big, tall, young striker. And I would say, like, those guys are kind of harder to come by nowadays. It feels like most of the strikers, are kind of these sort of kind of conventional type wingers that can kind of play as a striker here and there that are a bit more on kind of the smaller, kind of speedier side, whereas the Haalands, the Vlahovic's of kind of the world, the Osimhen's, all these kind of big, tall strikers kind of seem to go for big money, perhaps because it's really hard to make it at this sort of level, being a big, tall striker. But if he can cut it, then I say he could be a real coup. But that's as much as I know, is that he's tall, and I like tall players. At least
okay. And Jack, now Tim Vickery, obviously, Tim Vickery's been on our show several times, good friend of the show. He's also been on the Beeb this week, saying that he doesn't see what Veliz is going to give us. So maybe he's got it wrong. But he also said Bentancur wouldn't give us more than Winks. So, as is quoted here by King Hoddle, no idea how true that is, but I'm willing to believe you, King Hoddle.
Let's say it's true. I like
I like
the narrative.
Thing,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the opinion of a journalist, with no disrespect for those in the profession, they're journalists for a reason. And as a result, I don't know that we really can take too much. Now, he's obviously seen him play, and I think his point was well taken that he could name 5 other young, tall Argentinian traditional number 9 strikers who were in the Premier League that no one had ever heard of, because when he listed them off in that interview, I honestly had never heard of any of them. So I think it's okay to say, hey, there hasn't been success with this profile player coming into the Premier League, and it's because it's too big a jump from the Argentina first division, which is not what it used to be when I was a kid, to what it is to the Premier League. There's just a huge gap. And when I first saw the story, it was right. I think it was Fabrizio said it was going to be a loan back, which I was like, hey, perfect. You're stockpiling the organization with kids who, for 15 million, a 6'2", 6'3" guy who can get on the end of a cross. That's, for a club like Tottenham, that's chump change. That's the bar tab at a game. And so, I mean, I think that that wasn't a big deal. Now, the fact that he's coming in potentially to the club to be part of this year's first team, that seems a little strange. I still think it sounds like a player that you should be sending out to the bottom half of the table, or the top half of the championship table, see if the guy can cut it in England, because it is a different style, to say the least, between what they play in Argentina and what we're playing here over there in England. So, but I've got no problem with the signing, but I don't know anything about the guy. I mean, I didn't even bother watching the YouTube clips, because again, that tells you zero about a player, to watch their absolute best 11 seconds of a season. So
I tell you what, if you watched my highlights from a Tuesday night football, I could get a contract with Spurs, 100%. Stuart, know anything about this guy?
No, I hadn't heard of him at all before he came up. I do wonder, I'd be very interested to know if Romero or Lo Celso sort of
Lo Celso's former club, actually.
There you go.
Oh, is it?
I actually have a feeling Lo Celso, since he's on this bit of this redemption arc, maybe he's
Well,
played a bit of agent in this deal.
And that's the interesting thing about him coming over now, is that if he's got Romero, he's got Lo Celso in the club, that he's got some guys that sort of look after him and get him settled and all that kind of stuff, which is which takes time. So if you could bring him here, instead of him going back home for another 6 months or going out abroad for a year, maybe that's a logical way to do it. But and then he comes on for 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. I don't know. It's an interesting one. But if Messi's saying he's quality, that's another good indicator. So it's an interesting. I do like the fact that we're actually going after some of these South American youngsters, because we seem to be one of the few clubs that don't do that.
Got Gabbiadini out there, haven't we?
Well, that's what I said. I seem to remember months ago that there was some mention that we were changing that tactic, that we were going to start going after more South American talent and all that kind of stuff. So, hey, we're Tottenham. We love Argentinians in the team, and if we can have a nice little spine through the team of Romero, Lo Celso, and Veliz, then that's good with me.
Absolutely. And we've just released South American talent, haven't we? Good old Lucas, I see he's found himself a club. So
back to Sao Paulo.
That's good. Yeah. Good old Lucas.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's park him then, and let's talk about some rumours. So those are the confirmed ones. Let's talk about rumours. So Tamai, however you say it, Jack. Have I got that right?
Oh, Taremi.
Taremi.
I just don't. I could be totally wrong, and I would love for people to absolutely just rub it in my face next time I'm on here, but I just don't really see this as like a realistic sort of signing for Spurs. If I'm not mistaken, he's like Kane's age, if not older than Harry.
Older.
He's older than Harry Kane, so maybe I've actually, been too generous to him. He's, only really played at Porto. It really, if his best years have been at Porto. I actually thought even amongst the Iranian strikers, he's not even the best one. I actually think the other guy, Sardar Azmoun's not even that bad of a player. I don't know, like it just doesn't make a lot of sense. What I'm thinking is the fact that they're selling their striker Taremi and bringing in a new striker who I just saw that they announced, Porto.
Yeah,
maybe it's just all part of that, kind of thing. They're just linking him to whatever club they can.
22 goals in 31 appearances and 7 assists last season. He is good. That was his second season. His first season, 20 goals, 12 assists. So there's quite a bit of consistency there. It's just, it's a weird one. Like I think I was chatting to Caller before we went live that if you're going to sell Kane and then you're slotting Richarlison into that starting position, that logically you would want a similar type of player on the bench in case Richarlison gets injured or something like that, and he fits that particular profile. And whether that is just someone that's being primed in case we do have to make a decision very late in the day that he bring him in and he's here for a season, and then you reset things next summer. I don't know. I can absolutely guarantee you, though, that if Kane left and this guy, Taremi, came in, it would be bedlam, absolute bedlam. The certain section of the fan base.
Yeah. Well, on that basis, then, coming to you, Jack H, for this one, the beautifully named Gift Orban, 20 million been linked with him, 20 million euros from Ghent. He's firing them in over there, apparently.
Yeah, it's true, but he is a non-starter under the David Harris rule of transfers because 20 to 30 million, according to Davo, the club has never signed anyone in that price range that's ever worked out have been any good. So by definition, you have to rule them out. You either need to get that price down to 19 or jack it up to 31 because otherwise it's a total waste of money. For my feeling, I don't have anything against the guy at Porto. But in terms of where I see this club is, I mean, the guy at Porto sounds like the type of player you say, okay, we're just one or two players away from a complete squad of winning something big, and that's who you bring in. I don't see that, and the price that's been quoted of 25 to 30 million, I don't see it. I'd much rather spend it on Gift Orban, who, I'm no expert. I'll defer to other folks, but in terms of the profile of player, the type of player that I see, and you look at the stats and different numbers, I'd rather invest in him that money than the kid out of Porto, just because it doesn't seem to make sense. I mean, again, if you thought you were just one or two players away from challenging for a title, then okay, but I just don't see that's where the club is right now.
Yeah. If you're getting Taremi on a free transfer or a very low fee, like a Wout Weghorst or something like that, then maybe take the punt. But 25 to 30 million euros is ridiculous.
No. Mm-mm. But with that gem of wisdom, caller, Jack and Stuart, I'm going to have to take my leave because I'm still at the office and I got to get out of here before something happens. So it's going to get very loud. They're doing some work here. Well, they're going to do something to the next office, and there are going to be people making a lot of noise and reconstructing a wall. So I got to get out of here.
I can just imagine a wrecking ball coming through.
Yeah, it sounded like he was about to cue the chaos.
Yeah. Look, Jack, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, appreciate it. We'll see you.
Have a good night.
We're gonna take some questions in a minute. So send your questions in quickly. Apparently, I sound like Stuart as well. Stuart, where were you born? Where do you hail from?
I'm originally from Staines, just outside London.
Yeah.
Spent a number of years living in Swindon, and then I've lived most of my life in Bristol.
Literally nowhere near me then, so that's reassuring.
Yeah,
okay. Starting lineup against Shakhtar. Come on then. Jack, let's have your we've simplified the Jacks, so it's easier for me. Let's have your starting lineup for Shakhtar Donetsk. And do you expect us to see maybe what will become a starting 11?
I don't think we're going to get a glimpse of Van De Ven or Phillips. So I think it's going to be pretty much the same lineup that we saw against the Sailors, unless Harry Kane is sold, which I guess is the big one, right? They canceled the press conference.
Yeah.
There's, a lot of very quiet Spurs journos right now that aren't, saying a lot. It does feel a bit scary. And it even has been said that I guess the update while we've been doing this is sort of what I predicted, which is that, the deadline wasn't actually a real deadline. And then at some stage this weekend, we'll get an update. So I had a feeling that was going to be the case in some manner, and that this deadline was in some way made up by either Harry Kane's party or by Bayern Munich's. But if Harry Kane is still with us, I see him starting, and then the rest of the team, I think, is going to be the same from Lion City Sailors, to be honest. So Davies at left-sided center back, and then Udogie, maybe Emerson, but I don't know. I'd like to see Emerson given a start.
There was a bit of content with Ange early this afternoon where he was talking about Shakhtar and then the Barcelona game. So it seems to me that he's going to. We've often seen that the 2-11s and all that kind of stuff, and I do think that it sounds to me that he's going to maybe do 45 minutes for the 1-11, 45 minutes for the other 11, and then the same in the next game, so they have a chunk of time for both 11s. I don't know, but I agree with Jack. I think as a starting point, I think we'll probably see what everyone considers to probably be the starting 11, but how long they play, I think 45, 60 minutes max, I reckon, and then we'll be probably a wholesale other 11, I think.
We'll have some great Conte Cam for you. Not Conte Cam, bloody Conte Cam. He's consigned to history. Ange Cam. We'll have some Ange Cam for you on Sunday. That'll be entertaining. It'll be interesting to see who we go with. As it stands now, and you can play along with us in the chat, who would you start away at Brentford? If you accept that Van de Ven's done, which I think is fairly reliable from Fab Romano, what would your starting 11 look like? And Kane's obviously not left, but I'm assuming you would just put Richarlison in for him, so that's fairly simple as well.
Yeah. Who's going?
You go, Stuart. You go.
So if it's as it is at the moment, I would go Vicario, left back Udogie, VDV, Romero. I'm going to be controversial because I'm going to go with Emerson Morale at right back. Basuma, Lo Celso, Maddison, and then a front three of Son, Kane, and Kulusevski.
Okay. Jack,
that's be where we're lining up.
Any deviation from that, Jack?
I think I might have two controversial ones. I think I'll go pretty much same back four. I think I'll also stick with Emerson as well. I think he, just for the first game of the season too, does feel like maybe the better defensive option. Seems like the right idea. Brentford are a team that can hurt you, so it does feel like you would want, and good at set pieces, right? So it feels like, Royale would be a good guy to have. I actually might throw in Højbjerg if he is in any way still part of the plans. I feel like if we wanted to see Basuma played in a higher role, like, maybe a bit higher up the pitch and not played in the number 6, I understand that he can probably do both exceptionally. He probably is better even than Højbjerg at both. He's probably better than Højbjerg as number 6 and better than Højbjerg as number 8. But I do feel like if, again, on kind of thinking about kind of the defensive side of things, if we wanted to go for a slightly more defensive leaning lineup, maybe Højbjerg, Basuma, Maddison, Lo Celso gets brought in for Højbjerg to kind of loosen things up if we did need to kind of go after it more in the second half. And then I think you go Kane, Son, Kulusevski. I would just quickly mention, I know this, I'm never really been in this camp, but I'm starting to see why, some people are getting slightly frustrated a little bit with Kulusevski just because, the preseason has been pretty much the same from what we were looking at last season. And I know it's only preseason, but we are just sort of kind of waiting for him to be back to his best. So I'm curious if he doesn't have a great game, how much tolerance do we really give him? Because he's not like Sonny, where I think you give him like 10 games in a row or something. I think you only give him a couple or, a few. So
I think if Decky carries on the way he is, I think Solomon will displace him very quickly, because every time that Solomon's come into a game, it's just the way he attacks players and takes on players. Whereas the way Kulusevski's been playing for a long time now, it's very one-dimensional. There doesn't seem to be much change to how he's going about trying to get past players, and it seems very easy to defend against him at the moment. So I don't know what's behind that. Whether it's confidence, fatigue, might be carrying an injury. I don't know. But Solomon just seems to be a very interesting little player, and quite a clever little signing on a free. Well, let's see if they end up negotiating a fee for him tomorrow on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to be honest.
That's right.
I would have Vicario. I agree on Emerson. I don't think that's controversial, by the way. I think, but especially
Look how far
away
we've
at
come.
Brentford, especially away at Brentford. Well, look, Emerson Royal. I've never had an issue with his defence. You know, he's generally been pretty solid. You saw that against Arsenal. He was superb that day. You know, at the time we won 3-0, 3-1, whatever it was, at the stadium. And in several games, City away, there were several games where he was good, but he can attack, and he don't have to attack that much in this system. He just needs to step into midfield and recycle the ball. So that's a lot better, right? Udogie, I worry about, to be honest, purely because he's untested. But I think you've got to give him a chance. So I'd have him at left back. You'd have obviously Van De Ven and Romero.
I thought Udogie a lot last season with Udinese, and he's fearless. He's a very sort of, much like, considering how young he is, I do think he just needs to play. He will settle so quickly.
I think I would have Oliver Skip. No, I wouldn't have Oliver Skip. I do like Skip, but I'm afraid I'd have to have Bissouma in the 6th position. Interestingly, if Bentancur becomes fit again, I think I'd be very tempted to play him in that 6th position.
Oh, 100%.
By the way. But I think at the moment, Bissouma's, that's jersey's his, especially as they're making a big fuss of him. I saw Kerry mentioning it in the chat around the whole shirt number reveal and everything, and I'm not really sure why that's a thing, but so Bissouma at 6, and then attacking midfielders, it's got to be Maddison and Lo Celso, probably for me, Lo Celso, I should say, if I get the pronunciation correct. And then left-sided, it's got to be Son, Kane or Richarlison up top, whichever's still there. And on the right, I would have Solomon. I would. I think he's just impressed me a lot more than Decky in pre-season, and I think he's got a lot running in his legs, and I think it would do Decky some good to be dropped a little bit.
Yeah,
I do. Use him off the bench. I love Decky, by the way, but I've been considering the kid was free, Solomon. I was like, oh, he's not going to be much use, maybe just a squad rotation. But I thought he looked excellent.
Yeah,
really, really attacking, driving forward, and he's clearly got a shot on him.
He
is naturally left-sided, I think, but
he seems much. Well, he is. He does seem he's very good on both feet, which Decky, unfortunately, he's very sort of seems to be very 1 foot dominated. But I think this is the thing, isn't it? We've been crying out for a bit of depth in certain positions and stuff. Obviously, we're trying to get there now with a new wave of centre backs, but just to have genuinely good alternatives in different positions is exactly what we need. And all the stuff that I've seen of Ange so far is that he does make quite consistent changes in the team. So he's very consistent he'll bring off players on 60, 70 minutes because it's been so relentless in that sort of period that a lot of people get games. So hopefully that's.
I think Porro on the right as well, by the way. I think Porro higher up the pitch. I think I'd be happy to see Porro in for Decky on the right. I think he can do a ton of damage in advanced positions. I worry him a bit on the right. And just to be really clear, I'm not writing Decky off. I think he's a Rolls Royce.
I'm the one who brought it up. You can blame me. I think I was the one who kind of.
No, it's fine. I said I'd drop him, and I'm not writing him off.
It's not writing him off.
That's definitely not writing him off. I love the guy, but.
Just to quickly mention on like Solomon and Shakhtar, I feel like I dropped the ball kind of earlier a lot, and a lot of the players you wanted me to provide any sort of expertise on. But usually when it comes to like a Shakhtar player here and there, I do usually might have like a thing or two. I do kind of enjoy watching them. I feel like they always kind of impress me. with the fact that they're almost a bit like Ange. I think they enjoy playing like very progressive, kind of pleasing possession-based football, despite not having like usually the most talented or most proven of players. Usually, they often do have a pretty great academy, but even with how they played in the Champions League most recently, they did not do. I mean, they did not like really look as bad of a team as everybody thought they did. They even beat Postecoglou's team, in fact, and they were playing with like mostly like Ukrainian kind of like youth players, and like the majority of the team had been pretty much gutted of all of its talent and all of its sort of foreign exports.
They're
And,
not a
you
bad
know, and
side,
players.
though. Not a bad
But
side.
that's what I mean. I'm excited that we get to play Shakhtar. I have a soft spot for them. And I kind of, if you had asked me about Solomon and we hadn't signed him yet, I would have done a much better job, because that's actually a player that I kind of did know a bit about before he came to Spurs, just because I have a bit of soft spot for kind of Shakhtar.
It's kind of a weird anomaly that we've accepted a bid from a Russian club for Sanchez and then doing a charity match for Ukraine in the next breath. But there you go. These are
there's no chance he's going there.
I know it isn't, but the fact we accepted the bid,
Maybe 15 million of the Russians' money would go to Shakhtar. I don't know. No, we wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
They bid off a North Korean team at this point for Sanchez, because I think they're desperate to try and get him sold. Because I think at some point, like I said earlier, we're going to have to write some contracts off. Surely. I know it's not the most efficient way to do it.
I think what you will see is a lot of last minute loans, because I think that's generally the way the loan market works. So, whether we'll write off contracts, I think that is the absolute last option, isn't it? So I can well imagine that we would be loath to do that, as you would be, because any sensible business owner is not just going to write off assets left, right, and centre because a few angry fans think they should. The reality is you want to try and get something back for that asset, even if that's just to pay their wages for a season while the contract ticks down. So I think we'll see quite a lot of loans last minute. I think Brian Hill's been really unlucky. I think Tommy's going to be an interesting one, and I really hope we see him at the weekend. Because I'd like to see him in that 8 position. And we talk about the options in the side. In the side, look on the right, you've got Porro, you've got Decky, you've got Richie who can play out there. If Hill's fit, he can play out on the right as well. The same on the left, Solomon, Son, Richie, Hill, etc. Central midfielders, Tongi, Gio, Maddison, Benton Kerr can play there. He's even been he pushed Skip up in the first game, right? And Bissouma can play further advanced. So there are tons and tons of options. The issue is, obviously, we haven't got good rotation options at centre back. That is the one thing I worry about. Is obviously Van De Ven isn't the finished article, as you quite rightly said earlier. But we don't have enough quality of depth defensively.
We're back to where we started if he doesn't work out.
Absolutely. And there's question marks on the fullbacks, right? There's question marks, because I know we talk about Udogie, but he's new. Reggie, bit lightweight. Davis is a bit Davis. And you've got similar problems on the right, haven't you? Emerson can't attack.
Yeah, we don't have on either side like what you would class as a world class.
You have a Carl Walker.
Yeah.
So I suppose
Carl Walker, if we sign Carl Walker now, he would walk into the start.
Yeah. Of course, he would in most teams, to be fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a bit tricky. We've got lots of options at the back, but none of them seem good options. Whereas from midfield forward, we feel confident, don't we? And let's be honest, we don't know what Vicario is going to turn out like either.
My view on this was that I never, and I don't know how anyone could have anticipated it any differently. There's no way that we were going to go into next season as a finished article as a team under Ange, because there was just so much to do.
Yeah,
it's never going to all happen in one window. I've said before, the state of the squad at the end of this last season was we, as far as I'm concerned, we've regressed to just before when Poch came in, and there's the amount of work that Poch had to do to clear out the players that he didn't want for his system, the players that just weren't good enough. That took at least a season and a half, maybe even 2 seasons to get to the point where we actually started really going for it again. And I think that's just where we're at. And I just think we've got the bonus of potentially having a much more entertaining time while while we're doing this rebuild, and we just have to be patient. And I think that's the problem nowadays, that in the last year or two, that's just the patience has disappeared, and people just seem to lose their minds over the littlest thing now.
We've got a super chat from Dan, so thank you very much for your super chat, Dan. Are we happy with the goalkeeper situation? Well, I think Jack won't be happy till Lloris has left. But I was thinking about this, and for some reason I decided to watch this compilation of all Spurs defensive errors leading to goals last season, and the kind of where I get to with Vicario is he's got to be better with his feet than Lloris, because my 4-year-old
That won't be hard.
Exactly. And errors leading to goals, he was dreadful last season. And I'd forgotten actually about how many he actually made. Like, I watched this back and there were just so many clangers, so many, that even a 50% reduction and would be winning with Vicario. So I don't see how he can be much worse, if I'm being really brutally honest. And that's my take on it, and give the guy a chance. He was very highly rated. Last from the continent, and I think time will tell, won't we? But he needs lots of games. He's going to be very nervous when he's playing in front of 62,000 people for the first couple of times. He needs to feel at home. He needs to feel loved. So I think the fans, carry a bit of responsibility to get behind the guy, not jump on every error, because there will be errors. There's always errors with keepers, and they stand out more.
In the team, no matter what's going on behind the scenes, we just guys, when they go out for the game, need to get behind it all, because
always have to, even when it's Harry Winks.
There'll also be more.
I'm saying is the other lot.
Yeah,
there'll be more asked of him than Lloris too. Like Lloris, even though he made it look hard, he didn't really have that much to do really with the ball at his feet, and he still made it look difficult. And also the saves he had to make were always entirely with defenders in front of him. Never really were there that many one-on-ones that he had to sort of make. Never were there that many moments where he had to be asked to step out of his area, step out of his penalty area to win the ball high up the pitch, be a sweeper keeper. He kind of had a pretty reserved role for when
he first came to Spurs. He was a sweeper keeper, wasn't he, Lloris? He was decent at that, and it just all changed at some point and went downhill. But I think we're all relaxed about it, right?
I'm really relaxed about it. Yeah.
Well, I'm not. I'm relaxed in Vicario. I'm not relaxed in what if Vicario breaks his arm.
Well, you got Forster.
Forster's
all right.
Forster was the signing of the season.
Yeah, he was. He actually was in our poll. Yeah.
I thought Forster was injured at the moment.
I don't think it's a long-term injury, though, is it? It's not like a.
But it's a little worry. I mean, Forster is a reliable keeper. We'll see. It would just be very frustrating if, and it's very typical of what's going on, that because they've done it later in the window, the Gooners are going to end up getting Raya for 20, 30 million.
But, they can only play one keeper at a time, can't they?
That's the interesting.
So, it's let them crack on with it. I couldn't care less. I don't think he's that good anyway. I really don't.
Yeah, I think Vicario will come good. I like his character. I like his mentality.
Yeah, we shall see. So I hope that answers your super chat. Don't forget you can put a super chat in. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. There's 215 of you watching. We appreciate your viewership. Finishing position for Spurs. So some predictions, as I've not had you two guys on the show recently. Who wants to go first? Jack, do you fancy it?
I'd love for us to finish inside any European places. I'd love for us to finish in Europa League. Anything higher than that would be above my expectations. I just think the competition, the Premier League is the Super League already. If people don't think it is, maybe it might be in a few more years, then you'll probably be saying the same thing. But I think it's already become the Super League. It's really hard to get inside the top 5. I think we're going to finish 6th, to be honest, or 7th. But I'm fine with it if we have great games and attacking football. I will miss the cheeky, horribly fought 1-0s over Crystal Palace, because I do sometimes enjoy, those a bit more, where you just get a slimy 1-0 win over a team that you should be beating 5-0. I am going to miss that, actually.
Okay, Stuart.
I'm going to be optimistic and go for 5th.
Yep.
Because I do think that Man United aren't a finished article yet. I think they're still sort of in their little rebuild phase, even though they did well under Ten Hag last season. I think Liverpool are a bit of a question mark because they're rebuilding their whole midfield, and you take a couple of players out of their defence and they're leaky as hell. I think Newcastle, who knows, because the amount of games they're going to be playing, the same, with the likes of Brighton and stuff like that. We have this every
Villa.
season. There's a couple of teams, Villa, that they have a really great season and then they fall away the next season. So I think all this talk of, oh, we're behind Newcastle now, we're behind Brighton, we're behind Villa, I think that's bollocks. But
it's all unknown.
Of course, everything's unknown every season. That's the great thing about it. But I think Arsenal, Man City will be consistently up there again, barring some massive changes in their fortunes. And that's the peak competition, is trying to get into the top four. I think thinking above that at the moment is pointless. But I think we've got enough. Like you say, you talk about the squad. There's enough talent there. I just think that we had a squad that was broken in confidence. I just don't. And if you've got that break in behind the scenes where everything's disjointed, the squad, the manager aren't aligned and don't agree or whatever, then nothing's going to work. So hopefully, if we're all on the same page, then we can do some good stuff. But I think, for me, like Jack, I just want to be entertained. And if I'm getting that as a bare minimum, then anything beyond that this season's a bonus, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, I think it's an interesting league. I mean, I think City are going to be obviously up there. I think, so I hate to say it, I think Arsenal will be up there. I think they've bought very, very well. Beyond that, I mean, I don't think Man United are all that. I do think that Ten Hag is quite a limited manager. I think Newcastle have got so much football, and I think they overperformed a lot last season. So I'm not sure they'll deliver the same this season, if I'm being really honest. I think Villa, everyone's talking about them, but they've got a lot of European distraction, and their squad depth isn't great.
Yeah.
But albeit they've got a decent 11, but I don't think it's a better 11 than us. Chelsea, be interesting. I hope Poch fails miserably. But again, he's got talented footballers. It's just whether he can put it all together. And I'll be honest, I don't think he can. I think they've bought some pretty shit flops. And you look at all of that, and I'm going to say I think we can finish fifth. We've got no European football. I think that's going to be a big help to us. Big help.
It actually sounded like you were going to say a lot higher than that, to be honest, with all that.
I know.
I was going to say third.
I think we have to be realistic about the extent of our ambition. I think we get into the Europa League, most people will think we've done pretty well this season. So if we can get into the Champions League, I think that is ambitious, and obviously try and win a cup.
Europa League would be
actually try and win a cup. Play your best team in the cup. None of this dicking about bollocks. And it might be that you look back and you go, Christ, sacking Conte, falling out of Europe, that was the best thing that happened to Spurs, because it made us take the cup seriously and we won something. It made us have less, Thursday night weekend football, and we got top 4, top 5. So I think, I do think there is
to bed in Ange's system this season now, aren't we? That
and that's it.
Europa or conference, when, like you say, you're travelling, because either side of that, you're travelling. What do you get? A day of real training a week. Whereas if you're not in Europe, you do get the full 5 days or so. So
yeah,
it's definitely going to be a bonus.
You've got time. We've got time on the training pitch. So yeah, and if all goes well, fifth probably will be Champions League qualification. It all depends on the coefficient. Basically depends on how the British teams go in Europe, which ironically means you're going to be cheering your rivals to do well in Europe and win something. But when you look at last season, for example, West Ham won a cup, and obviously City won the cup. So that would mean that we would get fifth spot. So it's based on what happens in this season coming. As to what happens in terms of the qualification, but I think fifth will be there. I think we can absolutely do it. I think we've got the fan base. I mean, thank God Twitter isn't really reflective of the fan base, or you would think the world is on fire. It's like a horror film going onto Twitter and seeing all these raging like crazy people like going on about like we're the worst team ever in the galaxy. You know, I mean, get real. We've got talented.
That was just last week.
That was just last week.
Kane hasn't even left yet.
These people are coming out of Oppenheimer and thinking, if the world ends, I'll be happy. You know, because Spurs are so shit. I just get a little bit frustrated with the amount of negativity, and you know, I said it last week, I said it again this week. You know, we've got good players, up the pitch.
Yeah.
There are question marks over the defence, but we're signing centre backs. We've got, in effect, you know, a new right back, a new left back, a new centre back, and a new keeper. So you talk about rebuild. We've rebuilt most of the back line. Like that back line this season compared to what was starting last season is completely different. So you can't say Spurs aren't trying to rebuild. We are. And you can see that they're obviously targeting those positions as a priority. Whether they get it right, that's another question. But it's about going after it. It's about being aggressive. It's about trying to make a difference. So, look, I am hoping we see a different Spurs this season on the pitch and off the pitch, because there was just so much negativity last season. And it just, you know, negativity breeds negativity. And I do think that if people just go in there with moderate expectations, not thinking we're going to win the league or anything, I think they won't be disappointed, because I think Ange will absolutely get us playing some Tottenham-style football and people will love it. But it's going to take a little bit of time, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's going to take a little bit of time.
Look,
he's done the best job he can at repairing the fan base. I actually think Ange, in fact, I feel bad for him with some of the things that have gone on this summer with lack of transfer business, Harry Kane situation. All that has not made it easier for him. But what Ange has done, which I actually thought would take a lot longer, is sort of, you know, bringing and reuniting the fan base to some degree back together. And I understand that it looks like it was pure chaos, you know, last week on Twitter. But I do feel like in some way it actually is still in a better place than it was, you know, like 4 or 5 months ago. Like it did feel like he's in short space of time has reunited a lot of contingents of the fan base, you know, which is impressive. You know, considering any football, barely any, you know, has actually happened, you know, in terms of actual play.
Yeah. I mean, the definition of Spurs is Kane leaves and win a cup. I mean, I'd love that to happen, really. I would absolutely love that to happen. But Kane would probably want that to happen as well, being the Spurs fan. Something did happen that restored my faith in the silent majority. Not to sound like Donald Trump, because that is a Trumpism, but the silent majority, when you look at it, you would look on Twitter and think, as I said, the world's ending. Things are pretty toxic. I put a poll out this morning. Over 300 people voted on it. And I said, what's the mood like today? Twitter can be pretty toxic where Spurs are concerned. I'm trying to gauge the happiness of Spurs fans to discuss on the show tonight. Excited about Angeball, worried about next season, feeling bleak or moderate expectations. Excited about Angeball, got 60% of the vote. Moderate expectations, 25% of the vote, which meant only 8% were worried about the season and 7% were feeling bleak, which tells you that a lot of people think the same as you do watching this at home, and they are generally positive people, but they don't feel the need to bleat on about it every 2 minutes.
Yeah. And Twitter is a microcosm of a multi-billion fan base. So
yeah, I'm curious why you invited me onto the show then, caller, but I'm curious.
What's that? What's that?
No, I think I actually might have answered, you know, a bit worried about next season, you know, despite how much I like to happy clap and, you know, be optimistic. I might have still put my answer in, still a little bit worried.
And I do think it's things like this, you know, don't be the team if we're 1 down half-time on Saturday. Give the rebuild every chance. Give the rebuild every chance. Give the board hell off the pitch. The ticket price fiasco, disgusting. Back the trust, join the march. Fair ticket prices are what we after. So, you know, let's hold the board accountable for the right things and not the wrong things, and get after getting up the league this season with some beautiful Angeball. Stuart, it's been a pleasure having you on. I look forward to your company Sunday.
Thanks, brother.
I think we've got oysters and caviar, followed by some champagne that Daniel is putting on for us, and then you know, sit in a heated seat directly behind Ange Postecoglou. Yeah. So,
having champagne with Daniel and Donna.
And if you're not following us on Twitter, guys, and you're watching, then do our Twitter tags are there. So do hook those in, and we'll be tweeting, I'm sure, lots from my heated seat on Sunday. Our heated seats, it sounded like you're on my lap.
It's not going to be too heaty because it's not enough as it is at the moment.
This is it.
Yeah, you don't really need them this time of year, do you?
No, not really, but I'm going to be using a minute. Maybe the USB charger. I don't know. Jack, as ever, a pleasure from Brooklyn. Pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me on. Best of luck with the heated seat situation. Best of luck with the garnishes. I hope Spurs have already, maybe nude up, or maybe you don't want them to go for the same garnishes that they did last year. You want them to at least go for, a new one. So hope they have a new one.
That's what it's all about. That's what we want. Garnish.
That's all we really care about, not the center backs. They don't do garnishes.
I'll be sharing pictures. I've got a chauffeur actually taking me down to the game, so I'll. His name's Craig. He's on the podcast sometimes. You may know him. Yeah. Well, absolutely make sure that I have plenty of garnish and plenty of gin, and get sozzled. So look. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and share the show. Get into our socials. Check out podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, and all good pod providers. There's a new one available right now. If you're not a channel member, consider it. And if you're not a Patreon, what are you doing with your life? It's £3 a month. There's loads of benefits. You get Cheese Room merch. You get to enter our fancy football. So a brilliant time of year to enter it. There are some top prizes. We gave away signed shirts and all sorts. In the meantime, and for that, head to patreon.com/the podcast. In the meantime, let's get over the negativity. Let's have some positivity, and come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.